All right. Here we go. Let's see if I can hear myself. Because last time, we used the webcam audio instead of the new Aston. All right, we're going to jump right in. Here we go. Last week, we ended up reading about some stuff that was happening in Cuba. I believe I prefaced it with saying that President Kennedy did not accept any of the offers from the Joint Chiefs on that, any of the suggested plans. But I also said, don't give Kennedy too much credit because he had already been using this in full operation before the Joint Chiefs decided to suggest building on this. And yeah, here we go. This is called, actually, so this one's going to read a whole lot easier too, by the way. All right. Yeah. Now we'll jump right in. Here we go. Program review by the Chief of Operations, Operation Mongoose, Lansdale, 18 January 1962. Source, U.S. Department of State, Foreign Relations of the United States, 1961 to 63. Volume X, Cuba, 1961 to 62, Washington, D.C. Washington, January 18. Wow, I'm not used to the dates being the right way. Washington, January 18th, 1962. Source is a really long link right there. We'll put it in the chat. Copies were sent to the President, Robert Kennedy, Taylor, Rusk for Johnson, McNamara for Gilpatrick, McCone, Murrow, Woodward for Hurwitz, General Craig for the JCS, Helms, and Wilson. 3 copies were kept by Lansdale. Excuse me. The Cuba Project. 1. Objective. The U.S. objective is to help the Cubans overthrow the communist regime from within Cuba and institute a new government with which the United States can live in peace. A noble effort, to be sure. Concept of operation. Paragraph 2. Or section 2, rather. Basically, the operation is to bring about the revolt of the Cuban people. The revolt will overthrow the communist regime and institute a new government with which the United States can live in peace. The result requires a strongly motivated political action movement established within Cuba to generate the revolt, to give it direction towards the object, and to capitalize on the climactic moment. The political actions will be assisted by economic warfare to induce failure of the communist regime to supply Cuba's economic needs, psychological operations to turn the people's resentment increasingly against the regime, and military-type groups to give the popular movement an action arm for sabotage and armed resistance in support of political objectives. The failure of the U.S.-sponsored operation in April 1961 so shook the faith of Cuban patriots in U.S. competence and intentions in supporting a revolt against Castro that a new effort to generate a revolt against the regime in Cuba must have active support from key Latin American countries. Further, the foreignness, Soviet Union, and bloc of the tyranny imposed on the Cuban people must be made clear to the people of the Western Hemisphere, to the point of their deep anger and open actions to defend the Western Hemisphere against such foreign invasion. Such an anger will be generated in part by appeals from the popular movement within Cuba to other Latin Americans especially. The preparation phase must result in a political action organization in being in key localities inside Cuba, with its own means for internal communications, its own voice for psychological operations, and its own action arm, small guerrilla bands, sabotage squads, etc. It must have the sympathetic support of the majority of the Cuban people and make this fact known to the outside world. It is reported that the majority of Cubans are not for the present regime, but are growing apathetic towards what appears to be a hopeless future or the futility of their status. The climactic moment of revolt will come from an angry reaction of the people to a government action sparked by an incident, or from a fracturing of the leadership cadre within the regime, or both. A major goal of the project must be to bring this about. The popular movement will capitalize on this climactic moment by initiating an open revolt. Areas will be taken and held. If necessary, the popular movement will appeal for help to the free nations of the Western Hemisphere. The United States, if possible, in concert with other Western Hemisphere nations, will then give open support to the Cuban people's revolt. Such support will include military force as necessary. Section 3. Estimate of the situation. Our planning requires sound intelligence estimates of the situation in Cuba. The latest national estimate as of 28 November 1961 contains operational conclusions not based on hard fact. In addition to its intelligence conclusions, this is a repetition of an error in the planning for the unsuccessful operation of last April. The planning indicated herein will be revised as necessary based on the hard intelligence estimate of the situation by the U.S. intelligence community. A new national intelligence estimate, due on 23 January, apparently has been postponed until 7 February. It is recognized that one result of the project so far has been to start the collection of intelligence on Cuba in depth to provide facts on which to base firm estimates and operations. Section 4. A. Establish a U.S. mechanism for the project. Status. The President's Directive of 30 November 1961 was implemented by creating a U.S. operations team with Brigadier General Lansdale as Chief of Operations and with tasks promptly assigned. His immediate staff are Mr. Hand and Major Patchell. Representatives of secretaries and agency directors are, for the Secretary of State, Goodwin Hurwitz and Woodward. CIA is Helms, Defense, Brigadier General Craig, USIA, Wilson, B, Intelligence Support. Status. CIA made a very special survey of U.S. capabilities to interrogate Cuban refugees in the U.S. 1,700 to 2,000 are arriving per month. And on 16 January, approved a program increasing the staff at the Opelika Interrogation Center in Florida from the present 2 people to 34. CIA will build up agent assets. Positive intelligence assets inside Cuba are very limited, and it has no counterintelligence assets inside. Special intelligence assets will be exploited more fully. The Cuba project needs far more hard intelligence in depth than is presently available. CIA will require further assistance from defense and other U.S. organizations in this intelligence effort, and is submitting a specific qualifications for personnel on 19 January. C. Political platform for people's movement inside Cuba. Status. State has sketched in a broad outline. CIA is to produce the firm platform statement of aims for which the Cubans who will operate inside Cuba are willing to risk their lives, and upon which popular support can be generated. D. Nucleus for popular movement. Status. To date, CIA has been unable to produce the necessary political action agents for this purpose. Upon reevaluation of its capabilities, CIA now hopes to complete spotting and assessing 8 to 10 Cuban political action agents by 15 February from among Cubans available in the United States. The minimum need for the project to be effective is 30 such political action Cubans, and CIA is tasked to make a priority search for them among Cubans in the U.S. and Caribbean area. E. Deployment of nucleus. CIA is tasked to select 20 localities within Cuba where political action groups can be established. Initial selection and plans for establishing these action groups are now due 1 February. Havana and localities in the provinces of Camagüey and Las Villas will receive priority consideration according to present intelligence. Planning on this must be adjusted as firmer intelligence is acquired. F. Diplomatic actions. Status. State is concentrating on the OAS, Meeting of Foreign Ministers, which opens 22 January, hoping to get wide Western Hemisphere support for OAS resolutions, condemning Cuba and isolating it from the rest of the hemisphere. A companion resolution to offer OAS relief directly to the suffering Cuban people, similar to U.S. relief to Russia 1919 to 1920, is being considered as a means to reach the Cuban people sympathetically without going through their communist government. The OAS meeting is to be supported by public demonstrations in Latin America generated by the CIA. I'll read that again. The OAS meeting is to be supported by public demonstrations in Latin America generated by CIA and a psychological campaign assisted by USIA. They're going to fabricate popular demand for something. The major task for our diplomatic capability is to encourage Latin American leaders to develop independent operations similar to this project, seeking an internal revolt of the Cuban people against the communist regime. This is yet to be initiated by state and must be vigorously pressed. G. Economic warfare. Status. The critical key to our political action project is still in the planning stage under state leadership. State is basing future economic actions, including plans for an embargo on Cuban trade, on the outcome of the forthcoming OAS meeting. Meanwhile, state has chaired in an economic action group which agreed on developing 13 actions. 15 February is set for a report on implementing plans so that actions can be initiated. CIA was unable to undertake action to sabotage the sugar harvest, which commences about 15 January and upon which Cuba's one-crop sugar economy depends. Sabotage of transport, mills, sugar sacking, and cane fields was explored. Nice. H. This one gets a little interesting. Status. Equipment to enable TV intrusion of Havana TV broadcasts has been reactivated on a small vessel under CIA control. CIA plans to attempt intrusion on 22 January during Castro's forthcoming speech and parade demonstrations. You got a little vessel out there taking over the airwaves. Okay. Special sabotage support. Status. State has explored, with negative results, the feasibility of preemptive action with respect to tanker charters. Most block shipments to Cuba are carried in western bottoms. CIA has initiated action to contaminate POL supplies for Cuba, although visible results, stoppage of some Cuban transport, are not expected until mid-1962. J. Military actions. Defense has been tasked with preparing a contingency plan for U.S. military action in case the Cuban people request U.S. help when their revolt starts making headway. This contingency plan will permit obtaining a policy decision on the major point of U.S. intentions and is looked upon as a positive political psychological factor in a people's revolt, even more than as a possible military action. Defense has also been tasked with fully assisting state and CIA, as commitments of defense, men, money, and materials are required. K. Major elements of the population. Both state and CIA are continuing to explore their capabilities, with results largely negative to date, for mounting special group operations inside Cuba focused upon dynamic elements of the population, particularly 1. Line of source text not declassified. Oh, sorry. There's a line of text here, a reference line that was not declassified. It's stricken. Particularly, blank, through labor contacts to reach the workers. Other elements include enlistment of the youth and professional groupings. Special consideration is to be given to doing this through Latin American operational contacts. This is vital to the success of our political action nucleus when CIA can put it into place. L. Outlook. As reported to the special group last week, there has been a period of a realistic second look at CIA capabilities to mount the required clandestine operations against Cuba, and a subsequent start in tooling up. After this second look, CIA has concluded that its realistic role should be to create at least the illusion of a popular movement, to win external support for it, to improve CIA operational capability, and to help create a climate which will permit provocative actions in support of a shift to overt action. This outlook, although arrived at thoughtfully within CIA, is far short of the Cuba project's goals. CIA must take yet another hard look at its potential capabilities in the light of the following tasking to determine if it cannot make the greater effort required. 5. A. Intelligence. Task 1. There's a reference document. It's supposed to be on Cuba. Due 7 February. Task 2. By 15 February, Opalaka Interrogation Center to be made an effective operation for collection and processing of intelligence. CIA with support of Defense, State, INS, FBI. Task 3. Intelligence collection from Cuban refugees elsewhere than Miami area. CIA to survey other refugee points and on a priority basis to ensure maximum coverage of all such source points. 15 February target date. Task 4. CIA to continue its re-examination of intelligence assets with priority on agents inside Cuba and report on capability by 15 February. Also included is coverage of intelligence through third country sources, particularly those having diplomatic relations with Cuba. B. Political. CIA to submit plan by 1 February for defection of top Cuban government officials to fracture the regime from within. The effort must be imaginative and bold enough to consider a name defector to be worth at least $1 million US. This can be the key to our political action goal and must be mounted without delay as a major CIA project. Pay a guy to defect, $1 million. There you go. Task 6, CIA to complete plans by 1 February for cover and deception actions to help fracture the communist regime in Cuba. Defense, State, and FBI are to collaborate on this. Task 7, by 1 February, CIA to submit operation schedule for initiating popular movement within Cuba. This must include localities selected inside Cuba, assessment of selected Cubans, their infiltration, activity assignments, a political platform. One section must deal with the underground, assess its true status, and plans to use it. Task 8, State to follow up the OAS meeting by having U.S. embassies in Latin America exploit all opportunities to enlist local sympathy for the Cuban people and to increase hostility towards the communist regime in Cuba. State to submit a report on results of this assignment by 13 February so further planning can be programmed. Task 9. By 15 February, State to submit an inventory of operational assets in the Caribbean area, including capabilities of local governments or groups to mount operations on their own to help achieve the project's goals. Plans for early use of such capabilities are due by 19 February. Task 10. To submit operational schedule for using assets in the Caribbean area to achieve the project's political action goals. The objective of working on dynamic elements of the Cuban population, such as workers, farmers, is underscored. C. Economic. State to prepare recommendations to the President on U.S. trade with Cuba as follow-up to OAS meeting. If the minimum results of the meeting is an agreement to condemn Cuba as an accomplice of the Sino-Soviet bloc and adoption of a general statement that Cuba presents a threat to the peace and security of the hemisphere, State is prepared to recommend to the President that remaining trade between the U.S. and Cuba be barred. Task 12. State to plan with Commerce and other U.S. agencies on how to halt the diversion of vital items in the Cuban trade. Due date 15 February, cooperation of other OAS nations, particularly Canada and Mexico, is to be explored by State. Task 13, State with Commerce and others involved to plan on how to make positive list items to Latin America be subject to the same licensing procedures as applied to such golly. I forgot how boring these things can get. Let me skip a bit Feel free to read all this dullness. What do we got? Task 21. Here's a red letter one. CIA to submit plan by 15 February for inducing failures in food crops in Cuba. Because, people don't need those, do they? There's some talk here about getting Japan involved. Task 24, CIA to submit plan by February on disruption of the supply of Cuban nickel to the Soviet Union. Section D is psychological, so we're going to find some fun ones in there. Here we go. Task 25, USIA to submit plan by 15 February for the most effective psychological exploitation of actions undertaken in the project towards the end result of awakening world sympathy for the Cuban people as a David battling against the communist regime as a Goliath, and towards stimulating Cubans inside Cuba to join the cause. Task 26, CIA to submit by 15 February its operational schedule for a psychological campaign to provoke a relaxing of police state control within Cuba. This is to include effective means of publicly indicting people's criminals for justice after liberation of Cuba, not only individual top officials, but members of the Vigilancia, etc. Task 27, CIA and USIA will report on progress as of 15 February in developing identification of the popular movement inside Cuba with songs, symbols, and propaganda themes. It says it. It even says it. Propaganda themes. Ugh, I hate propaganda. By 15 February, Task 28, by 15 February, CIA will report on plans and actions for propaganda support of the popular movement inside Cuba. Included will be exactly what is planned for use by the movement inside Cuba and feasibility of using smuggled food packets such as the I Shall Return cigarette packets to the Philippine guerrillas in World War II as morale boosters in generating the popular movement. I think that's enough for tonight. I'll send you some more next week. There's a couple more good ones in here. I'll pick those out and we'll do a really short one. Thanks for watching. Tell me what to read next. After that, after the rest. Have a good night.